Hey, everybody. Welcome to Conversations in Ken's Café. I'm your host, of course, Ken Somerville. We have Sidian Kaufman with us today from Northwest, or Pure Water Northwest. And we're going to be talking about water today. But Sidian, let's start with how the heck did you get into water in the first place?
Sure, yeah. So I actually was in property management. And I had a background in mediation. Mediation got me into property management. And property management, I ran into this really interesting problem sometimes where tenants would tell me their water was awful. Smelled like rotten eggs, brown in color, just disgusting, right? And then I would test it. And I would go in and take it to the lab. It would come back all within the legal levels, no legal problems whatsoever with this horrible water. And the owner would literally turn around and say, well, I don't have to fix it then. And I'm like, well, and that's where my mediation came into play. Then I was like, well, you might lose the tenant and not be able to get another one. So
yeah, well, yeah. Everybody puts the tap on and they smell, the gas. They're going, I don't want to be drinking this stuff.
Exactly. Yep. So yeah, absolutely. The solution to that ended up being that, they got a treatment system in there. And part of that brought me to talking to Chris Pelton, who founded Pure Water Northwest. And through this process, he explained everything to me, explained how the EPA sets two different standards for drinking water. One is the health guideline, the goal level, and the other is the legal level. And so those two contradict each other sometimes, or they don't align perfectly, as you might imagine.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
Okay, well, so some of the things that we have to deal with, especially I'm up in Alberta, Canada, and we have a lot of natural gas and oil, is we get that rotten egg smell, that hydrogen sulfide coming out of our water all the time. And that a lot of us have hard water, soft water. So we have a lot of systems installed to mitigate that, because we're talking out of town people. The people in town on town water or city water don't have to worry so much. Yeah. But anybody that's putting in a well can have these problems arise once they've have their well put in. So are you looking at, I know you do testing, etc. So how do you start with assessing a well? So say I'm a fresh homesteader and I just put in a well. What should I do to, understand what's in my well and what I'm going to need to do to have healthy drinking water?
That's a great question, because it's not the same thing as what the state minimally recommends. The state is looking for those maximum contaminant levels. So when they recommend something for you to do, it's really with that in mind. And it's also somewhat based on what they've seen in the area. But honestly, that aggregate does not necessarily speak to your individual well.
Yeah.
It's so inexpensive these days to get full spectrum testing done. On our website, you can go to the testing category and buy a full spectrum test for a few $100s. There's another company called TapScore. You can buy a test for a few $100s. And that allows you to get full spectrum testing done. And when I say full spectrum, I mean like 20 metals, a dozen inorganics, that kind of thing. And that panel of 50 different things gives you a really clear picture of what's in your water.
So I noticed that you also do a bacterial testing. So you're doing, a full spectrum of all the components possible, or not all of them, but the majority possible in a water column. Yeah. How are you finding, I don't know if you're doing a lot of stuff out of the Northwest, if you're getting tests from a lot of different areas. But what are you generally seeing as an overview of how people's water is in the Northwest?
Um, the well, so the Northwest is weird, and when I say weird, I mean kind of unique. I think maybe Hawaii might be similar. Um, the amount of silica that can be in our water is really
Mhm.
high here. And it's funny because silicon can mess up other water treatment, if that makes sense. It can make other water treatment not work anywhere near as effectively. So
Mhm.
um, that that becomes this unique problem that as a technician, I have to consider that in all the test results I do.
Yeah.
We sometimes talk to people in other parts of the country, and I have to remember to flip that concern off actually. Um, so in the Northwest, though, other than that, we have a lot of arsenic. Not a ton over the legal level of zero point zero 0.01 parts per million, but
Mhm.
above the health limit, which is zero, actually. Um, we've got a surprising amount of uranium and cadmium sometimes. We also run into something called iron bacteria, quite a lot,
Okay.
which is not a health concern, but it is nasty looking. It
It
basically,
makes your toilet all brown, right?
well, the brown water is actually just oxidized iron. This
Okay.
actually can make your toilet be gross looking. I actually can share some images of this if you
Yeah.
if I don't know if your thing allows me to do screen sharing or not, but I can.
Yes, if you go to present.
Okay, let's see here. Yep, I see it now. All right,
Okay.
so and then share screen. All right, so um, there we go. All right, so here we are. So these are iron bacteria problems. That scum that you see there, that's
Yeah.
a biofilm that actually forms with iron bacteria. So iron bacteria is just a bacteria that eats iron. You can
Okay.
see here this kind of film that's forming around the edge. It eats iron and it creates a film to protect itself as a byproduct. And then that film can actually have a degradation, which can create a hydrogen sulfide or rotten egg smell, or create a pocket for sulfite forming bacteria. So iron bacteria is really nasty and crazy because if it's getting to a point where it's creating this scum, any treatment system you try and use in order to resolve it, any treatment
Mhm.
system that you are actually attempting to treat other things in your water with, the iron bacteria will just destroy that treatment system. So,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, it's going to create all kinds of other problems. So you have to pre-treat for that before you can
that's right.
actually put it through the other systems. Now,
Yep.
somebody mentioned in our comments, Bob, and he lives, he said, a walking distance from Lake Shasta. But bleach, I know a lot of people will do what's called shocking of a well, where they'll
Bob's
dump
right.
a cup of bleach down. Is that something you recommend? Because like bleach isn't exactly healthy for most people.
So, I'll speak about that. Bob's right. Bleach is the thing to kill iron bacteria, and a lot of people try and do it with ozone. Ozone doesn't work. It works for a short time, and then the ozone system gets completely overwhelmed.
Right.
The uh, actually using the most surefire way to do it is create a little mini municipality. Basically, you have to dose it with an exact amount of chlorine into a
Mhm.
mixing tank with a motorized automated valve that's set on a timer to get rid of the scum, and then you have to use a very high grade carbon system in order to get rid of the chlorine so you're not drinking that chlorine. That is
Mhm.
expensive. If you decide not to do that and you're like, I'm going to get rid of my iron bacteria by using chlorine down the well, we've done a lot of tests and we found that if you're above 500 parts per million of iron bacteria, it will come back. Uh,
Okay.
unless you do the kind of chlorine dosing that is very intense, and sometimes where you use force to actually push the chlorine down the well so that it will actually fill into the spaces of the aquifer. And if you do that, you can sometimes get rid of iron bacteria that's higher than 500 parts per million, but we've had almost no success doing well shocks if the iron bacteria is above 500 parts per million.
Okay, so this is also included in your water test to see what parts, are there of this particular bacteria. Have you found anything else that is going to, eat up that bacteria?
No. In fact, we talked to an expert about this, a guy by the name of Roy Collimore. He is the guy that he's a doctor, specifically specializes in iron bacteria. He is the guy that James Cameron actually used to help with the Titanic recovery.
Okay.
When he was doing that when he made Titanic, he also did a separate project where he actually paid to go down there and help do some Titanic recovery. And that guy, Roy Collimore, was the expert. And there's a ton of iron bacteria involved with the Titanic, which because it's made of mostly iron. That film that's around it, some of that is iron bacteria, some of that is just a naturally occurring film that occurs down there when biological matter degrades and sticks to iron. But yeah, I mean, he told us very clearly that there's only two things that can kill iron bacteria in a way that's reliable, and one of them is not safe for humans. So chlorine is like the safest for humans that we're going to get in that regard.
Okay, so now I know because we grow a lot of plants, etc. A lot of us are using municipal water where chlorine and chloramine is something that we don't want to be spraying, whether it's our lawn or our garden. Do you guys have things that you sell to people, say for a garden hose or anything like that, or is it strictly whole house or whole property systems you guys deal with?
Yeah, so we can do that for some people for their gardens. It's rare to have people want that. Usually when they talk to us and they hear about chlorine in relation to their own skin and hair and drinking, they end up wanting it for themselves too. But yeah, I mean, if you've got a really good fridge filter on and that's getting rid of most of your chlorine, we can do a similar thing for your garden for sure. Where it's like a smaller system and it's not related to your whole house, that's absolutely something we can do.
Okay, now is this a system that they'd have to get a technician to install, or is this something that's easy for a DIY guy to throw into his system, for that particular outside tap?
So, I mean, that depends on the DIY guy. In Washington,
true.
In Washington State, which I don't know the spread of all your listeners. In Washington State, there's no law preventing a homeowner from doing their own work. They can just do their own work on their own house. They're allowed to do that with some exceptions. And so if you're good enough, you can definitely do it. We have had a number of customers who have installed our treatment systems then call us and say, hey, I need you to come out and help with this. But we've had a number of them be able to do it easily, for sure. I mean, our systems are no more complex than systems they sell online with the expectation they're going to do it themselves. But the settings on the system and customizing those really do require some water science. And so making sure that's done right is part of the magic, I guess. That being said, if it's just a straight filter, like you were talking about on that garden hose, that's not hard at all. You cut the line, you plumb it in, you plumb it in the other side, and then the water flows through and it's done. So that's not hard. No, not at all.
So basically a couple of shark bite fittings and a cutter for your copper line, and you're good to go in a
You're
short
good to
time.
go. Yep.
So how about filter sales? Because obviously this is going to take a filter to be pulling that out. And of course, everybody's going to be a little bit different on how long the filter will last because everybody's water is that little bit different.
Yeah.
Do you guys do filter sales globally? Because we do have a global audience, Australia, Europe, all over Europe and into Asia, etc. So you never know who you're going to get a call from.
Yeah, we will help people globally, but usually if it's a simple filter, they'd be better advised to go somewhere else. Our main benefit is we're really, really, really good at water. So if you want to make sure that nothing is missed, if you want to make sure that it's done right the first time, and if you want to make sure that, or if you have particularly difficult water, then we're great to reach out to. We once had a customer who bought a ranch, moved all his cattle on, then went on vacation. He came back and 50 of his cattle were dead. Yeah. So how does that happen, right? We found out, we did our test. The basic test did not come up with anything. So we looked at the environment to identify like what flora was there. And from doing that, we kind of determined that, and this was mainly Chris who did this. He's the genius behind this. I don't want to take credit for this. He kind of determined that the types of plants might actually degrade and cause cyanide. So he did a test for cyanide, and it turns out that due to the leaching of the plants into that particular spring well, there was a naturally occurring cyanide spring that was strong enough to kill 50 cattle, meaning this guy would have been dead.
Oh, yeah. If he had drank that,
Yeah. Because you don't notice that right away. Like at the levels that we're talking about there, cyanide either kills you like really fast and you choke and bleed out, or you're like sick later. You keep drinking water to feel better and then you die overnight. So that's that was very lucky for that guy. And solving that was its own adventure. We had to go to several, because it was a class 1 contaminant, we had to go to several engineers. The engineers said it would be easier to get water from the moon than to fix this water. And Chris was like, nah. And so he figured out how to fix it. He turned it into the guy, said, what about this? Guy looked at it. All right, that'd work. And we got it fixed. So yeah, we handle particularly bad situations too. That we're really good at that.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted you to come on is this is what you do for a living. And these types of stories, I'm really quite interested in, because I don't think there's anybody out there that hasn't watched this program that's probably ever heard of that happening. So you're saying that the plants themselves in dealing with the runoff were actually creating the cyanide, or can you explain it a little bit more in depth, because there are people that will be interested in this?
Well, determining exactly how the cyanide got into the spring, that was guesswork. We did never determine that for sure. But when we looked at the kinds of plants that were there, it led us in the direction of checking for cyanide. And then that made us realize that yes, in fact, we don't think it was just the plants that were visible at the top. There was some deep rooted plants that were degrading into the water, basically. So that was our guesswork, and it turns out the guess ended up being right, because when we tested for cyanide, we got that high level of cyanide hit, which is super rare. This is a very rare occurrence. This is not something that,
which is good.
Most people should not be worried about this, but it does also show that some weird stuff can happen with wells.
Well, for me, when I'm thinking about it, I'm wondering if it was more, not so much that the plants you were looking at can survive through cyanide, or can live in that environment, but the plants that weren't there, that can't live in it, could lead to the same basic perception of there may be something wrong in this area, and this is where we need to look. So I just did my own personal thoughts on that one.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So do you deal a lot with, growers, whether it's, hydroponic, aquaponic, or just, normal people that are growing that come to you and want solutions for their water systems to have a better water for what they're doing?
Yeah, we do. I mean, this isn't a ton. It's interesting. The state of Washington, or at least this area, made um, some growing of marijuana legal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they made it legal. And so what happened after that is a lot of people who had already been growing for a very long time and were very good at it got
Mm-hmm.
into growing marijuana in this state. And they went and got their licenses. And suddenly, what they've been doing their whole life and what they've been really good at, now they're doing again. Interestingly, though, and not unsurprisingly, it was all cowboy hydroponics, right?
Yeah.
They're not really super concerned about chlorine in the water, copper toxicity, any of that. If their plants got some of that, they would add additives to it in order to neutralize it, in order to make it. So rather than extracting stuff from the water, they were used to adding stuff to the water.
Mm-hmm.
So the culture has not changed enough that a lot of growers are actually seeking out expert advice on water treatment, or they are literally seeking out extremely expert advice, people who are absolute experts at plants and marijuana only. We then fall in the middle. We're great. I mean, if you call us and try and make your water amazing for your 502 grow operation, the legal marijuana growing operation, we'll be great at helping you. And we've helped a couple, but when I say a couple, I literally mean two. Like, and so, but yeah, what you look for and the results are different. You definitely can't. There's a huge range of strontium, for example, that you can have for human consumption. If you're growing marijuana, you want almost none, for example. You need to be very careful about your range for your pH balance has to be super tight. You can't have any copper toxicity. In fact, people who have copper plumbing who are trying to grow it may want to move to PEX. Literally repiping can be a good idea if you're really concerned about it. So we definitely run into that. Yeah.
Well, a lot of that is people don't understand that cannabis, and I'm in Canada where it's illegal, or it's legal in Canada all across, the entire country. But the testing regimen that a cannabis grow goes through to be at the commercial level, if we were putting our food through those same, things of what's toxic, what's not, there'd be nothing on our shelves.
Yeah.
But that's the first I've heard of actually changing the copper piping into PEX, to alleviate that concern. Are more people going with say a reverse osmosis system to take everything out? And is that something where your bacteria we were talking about earlier, would that be removed by a RO system?
Well, so let's switch between bacteria and the kind of stuff an RO does. So RO will and let me really make sure the word will is not mixed with the word should. RO will remove bacteria.
Okay.
But RO should not be relied upon to remove bacteria. The membrane is kind of a perfect environment for bacteria to expand within. And you can get a bad bacterial situation, even though the membrane itself is doing its job. Eventually it can overwhelm. So you could put a UV system prior to the bacteria. We've done really elaborate water treatment systems for 502 grows. We've created them. There's actually a company in Canada we partnered with for this, where they had these really elaborate and impressive RO units that recirced the waste back into the unit in order to lessen the amount of total waste that went out. And using multiple membranes. These were high-end vortex systems, bigger than me, large systems. With that design, we put it through an ozone system, and then we use the UV to neutralize the ozone. So there's no bugs in the water after that. Everything's dead. Unless, of course, iron bacteria is part of it or something really rugged and biofilmy, which wasn't in this case. And then we ran it through those ROs. And then we did the NPK nutrients back into the water after that, so that the nutrients were perfectly dialed in. Then it went through the hydroponics and all that waste was collected. It went back into a recirc for nutrient recapture, went into a sensing system, which then pushed it back into the system and identified what dosing was required. And then the nutrients were able to be reused. So at a system that costs $170,000 to design and implement, they made their money back on this giant farm in 7 months on not having to spend as much on the nutrients. So that's just an example of the kind of stuff we've done or been involved in doing before.
I was thinking more like tomato growers and things like that, because a lot of them are actually using the hydroponic systems. Personally, I don't agree with those systems. I haven't found a nutrient solutions that is biological. And one of the things that we teach is how a plant grows, which is through cell division, the same as we grow. And it's the biology that's actually in control of that. So running those types of systems, you are actually hurting yourself because you're hurting the biology that's actually building your plant. But that's a totally different conversation.
That's interesting though.
Yeah, there is a liquid solution that may be coming. It's been ran a few times in hydroponic that's 100% biological, but we'll have to see how that goes. It's still some of it is still in research, but it is looking very promising. But mainly, I like to grow with the understanding that I'm actually farming biology, and the biology is building the plant. So I like to focus personally on the biology. That's where the biology of the copper, is really interesting to me. I'm thinking to myself, okay, if there's something that eats that, because everything's predator prey, whether it's in our bodies or in nature, there's something always eating what's there. So it's just a matter of finding the right biological component that eats that bacteria to be able to, slow it down or put it back into balance. But how about, do you guys do a lot with, say, pulling water from an external reservoir or a river or a creek or anything like that? Or is it basically strictly well water you're dealing with?
Well, we actually definitely have done river water before.
Okay.
And rainwater. It's tricky though, because every aspect about river water or rainwater is less reliable than your well water source is going to be. It is less certain of what you're going to get. If a bird with a particular biological setup poops on your roof that you're collecting the rainwater in, then that day it's different. If you have something happen upstream where you're collecting your river water, then that day it's different. But taking a generalized sample, and then overdoing it on bacteria removal and a little bit overdoing it on carbon gives you really close to having very reliable water. We've had to do anion resin with carbon before on a rainwater catchment because of what was the metals that were actually found in the results. For river water catchment, we actually have by sending the collection way upstream, as far upstream as we could plummet, and then doing UV. And they didn't want chlorine. We recommended chlorine because it was the safest way to guarantee that, because some bacteria will get through UV if it's certain types or at certain levels, because UV is about contact time. With chlorine, you can put it into a mixing tank and have it sit. And then you can collect the waste at the bottom, blow it down, then take the chlorine that has been turned into chloramines or chlorine byproducts, trihalomethanes, all that stuff, and catch all that in a separate system that has anion or carbon resin. And then you have clean water. Like carbon's incredibly good at removing chlorine. It's the best thing in the world for that. So.
Well, and it's amazing because everybody's doing carbon capture, yet all biology and us are made from carbon ourselves. So, yeah, we're a good filter system too, if we're healthy. But on chloramine, because I know with chlorine, you know, we used to teach people, you know, you take a 5-gallon bucket, let it sit overnight. It's going to volatilize off. But with the chloramine, it doesn't do that. So what would you recommend for somebody that's, say, a small gardener or something that is dealing with that being put in their municipal water supply to remove that for their gardening?
Yeah. So carbon is good with chloramines, but it has to be a really good quality carbon. Otherwise, you're looking at, if you really want full removal, you're looking at anion resin. If you, the types of carbons we're talking about, right? There's granulated activated carbon, which is the most common thing, the cheapest thing, the thing you've heard about before, right? If you acid wash that and really like get all of the ash and the stuff out, you make it catalytic, and that makes it much better at neutralizing the chloramines. You can just buy a catalytic carbon. I'm not saying you have to do this yourself at home.
Okay, good, yeah.
But yeah, if you buy catalytic carbon, like a really high grade carbon, I mean, I'm not telling anyone to have to do this at home. We can solve all these problems for you. But people who are do-it-yourselfers, get a very high grade catalytic carbon. Use that for chloramine removal. I mean, that's
is that something you guys sell?
Oh yeah, we sell that for sure. You can get it. You can get it online too. I'm not trying to take business away from myself, but I don't want to. I also don't want to capture anyone to have to only use me. You can find it online for sure.
Well, I like to always recommend, you know, buy local if you can, but if you can't, buy from somebody that you can trust. And you're talking about this and explaining it. That gives me a sense of trusting you that you're willing to talk about this and ways to do that. So, you know, for the people that are in the Northwest, you know, please reach out. Somebody that is going to help you do what's right for what you need to have done. Now, we did have a question my wife put in, Silly Lily, which is, where did I? Oh, of course, I flipped off of it. There it is. Structured water. Do you deal with, or have you heard of structured water at all?
Yes, I've heard of structured water, and I'll tell you, I've been on a number of podcasts recently, and I've had a number of customers ask me questions, and I will I'll tell you the two most common things I get questions about right now are structured water and fluoride in water. Those are the
Mhm.
two most common questions I get. So structured water is basically the idea that water is healthier if it's in
Mhm.
a structure. How do you put water in a structure? The guy over here at the University of Washington, really close to us, I can't remember his name. I'm
Gerald
sure
Pollock,
is that his name? That rings a
Dr.
bell.
Gerald Pollock, the fourth phase of water.
That's the guy. That's the guy.
Yeah, he's a regular on our channel actually.
Okay, great. So he talks about this, and everything he says is accurate as far as it being able to actually have a structure to water. And in this theoretical universe where that structured water gets into your body, yeah, that would be beneficial.
Mhm.
How does that happen though? Right? As soon as you shake the water, as soon as you pour it, it moves away from that neutral that zone that I can't remember the name of the zone.
Easy water.
Thank you. Yep, it moves away from the that zone and becomes unstructured. There's some
Mhm.
indication that fruit could have some structure to it and retain some structure as it goes inside, actually.
Yeah.
Fruits, there's some indication that that's the case. The total science of that is still out. But as far as the taking this magical structured water, and I say magical just because it is still how to actually have that remain structured as it's going into your body, that's still unknown.
Mhm.
So I I don't he's a doctor and I don't want to like directly contradict him. I don't know if I just did. Because I don't really know what he says about that. I
Mhm.
do know that I studied his science. Everything that I've heard him say is accurate.
Mhm.
Unless he has said that the water will go into your body and stay structured, I don't know how that's possible. So that's my viewpoint about structured water. I hope I didn't break any hearts.
Oh no, not a problem. Just how do I phrase this? It's the structured water is basically the capturing of the energy, and we can do that in ourselves. We can put a t-shirt on ourselves that says love, and that energy actually is going to project into our body, just like we can put it on a cup of water. I've actually used marbles and reran water out of my tap, through the marbles to break it up and almost add more ozone to it because it's being broken, the molecules being broken up. But after running it through that way a couple of times, you can literally taste the difference. Now, I don't know if that's making it into structured water or how that is being,
Yeah.
What that would be, but I know the flavor and the taste was a lot better when I was doing that.
And now you're getting into the realm of that Japanese guy.
Dr. Yamamoto.
There you go, that guy. Now you're getting in. Now you're getting into his realm of what to do with water, what's water structure and stuff, for sure.
Well, I know I studied his stuff probably 15, 20 years ago when he was still alive. And I found out a lot of the pictures he was taking, it was very selective,
Yeah,
but the whole idea behind it, the principle of being able to put that energy and focus, love or hate or etc. into water, I've seen it in myself where it does work. Like energy, frequency, vibration. Nikola Tesla, started that a long time ago, and that's something that Lily just put up. It does exist. We see it as growers with our plants, etc. All the time. Where if we put in the right intention, they actually respond. Now, that energy connection is there. Really hard to explain it, but it's amazing we can do the same thing with water. Have you actually ever tried that? Like, I know people that, you know, put magnets around their water pipe to try to, you know, force the molecules together, etc. Have you ever heard of that?
So magnets are even being sold for that now, and we have never actually seen it. Uh, just I don't get excited because I have never actually seen that work. The stuff you talked about before, though, about the feeling, like that is not to be mistaken. Like there's like there was a study done in 2002 where patients who had like horrible knee pain were given like three different procedures. They were given like surgery and then saline flushing or incision with no internal work. And people who had the fake surgery actually got long-term relief and like real genuine benefits. The human mind is capable of insane stuff. So absolutely can't say anything bad about any of that stuff at all. But putting the magnet on your pipe, we've never seen it actually lower actual
Numbers.
numbers of hardness in any way, shape, or form. Yeah.
Well, I know, like, and Super Nessa, if you, I don't know if you can see our comments or not.
No, what?
Let me bring it up. I would like to have my distilled tree water tested and analyzed, but not sure where to go. Now, just to let you know, Super Nessa is an Aboriginal native from Canada. He lives down in the east in Ontario. He actually uses tree sap, and he's doing hydroponics.
Yeah.
He's using tree sap that he draws out of a variety of trees to feed his plants. So could he actually get the test equipment from you?
What's the viscosity of the water? Is it syrupy, or does it have like motion to it? The reason I ask is because the laboratory is testing with viscous water is actually going to be problematic. So that's why I'm curious if it's super thick, he's going to have more problems. Separation by freezing.
Yeah, so and I know he's been drying some stuff as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you can get it to the point where it's liquefied, you can definitely get it tested. You can get anything tested that will basically be able to be drawn up by a little dropper and dropped one drop at a time. Anything that you can get in that form. Yeah, so you could definitely do that then. And as far as where to get it done, I don't know if there's a version of this in Canada. If you go on to tapscore.com, TAPSCORE, and look for a full spectrum test, I would choose one that is for well water, not because you're using a well, but because the real way that they're determining the difference there is it going to have chlorine added to it, which obviously in this case it won't. So if you do well water, that's a very broad spectrum test. And also TapScore does have laboratory experts you can reach out to and say, you can also call me and I can try and help if you'd like. But if you contact TapScore, you can get on chat with them, talk about laboratory experts, explain what you're trying to do. And they might be able to mail you a test kit, I think, even to Canada. There also may be a version of that in Canada. So
there you go, Super Nessa. We want to see those test results when you're done with them as well.
I'd like to see them too.
Well, it's amazing because you think that your trees, the actual roots, especially the tap root, they've seen them literally 20 kilometers deep through a mountain plateau.
Well, yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, so that's drawing up nutrients in biology, etc., from such depths that we're not going to ever see it, but the tree's bringing it up.
And then,
that's, yeah.
and then it gets down to a point where the taproot is spread so much that
Mhm.
how do you know whether it itself is still taproot or mycelia? Because that goes on for miles and
Yeah.
miles and miles and miles, and like I don't even remember how far, but like I think it hundreds of miles, to a point where how can you actually differentiate where that mycelium stretch versus the new one that it's linked to is separate?
Yeah.
So I don't know that it goes under the ocean, but like within a bounded space, you're having all of the trees in the entire continent connected in one way, shape, or form.
Yep. Until they started using herbicides and pesticides and
Right.
killing the biology that was creating the mycelium, because mycelium is just a higher grade of biology. That's what we've been killing in our fields, and that's why our food, when we buy food, 100 years ago, an apple you could eat one a day to keep the doctor away. Now you almost got to eat 20 or 30 for the same results. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's why we're trying to bring the biology back into our soil structures and not, destroy the biology. That's why, it's so important to have experts like you on talking about what can be done to take those chemicals out of the water we're using,
Yeah.
not just for our own drinking purposes, but for the animals we're consuming, the cows, the pigs, the goats, and for the vegetables, etc., that we're consuming or our animals are consuming. Because face it, if we eat something that's been covered in pesticides and that gets into our gut biome, we kill our gut biome. And so an animal, it's the same way. We want to stop that as much as possible. So I really appreciate the expertise that you bring in understanding what to do and what not to do. And the chlorine and the chloramine, the carbon filter, to get rid of that
Yeah.
chloramine, especially like a lot of us are involved in a cannabis industry background. We were normally using carbon filters basically for cleaning the air before
Yeah.
it went outside. So nobody went, oh yeah, man, I want to go where that is. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's an amazing thing. Uh, okay.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing that everybody is really coming together more and more with an understanding we need to clean up our own act, and that, know your local farmer, because that's the only way you're going to get actual healthy food.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
I know I've spent a lot of time on I-5, running up and down that corridor. When I was, quite a bit younger, I used to drive, or deliver down in your area quite a bit.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that, people are finding in, say, a Lahar area, where, if anybody that doesn't know what a Lahar is, it's when the volcano blasts off and all that stuff comes down through a river channel out to the ocean. Are you guys seeing any difference in those type of areas, or is that something, that you've dealt with in those areas?
Yeah, actually, I mean, silica, just a lot
Okay.
more silica. But there have been some interesting metals in that area. Um, but the main thing is silica, and then there's sometimes this silica mud that
Mhm.
happens that's really, really difficult to treat. You have to basically either put it into a settling tank and draw from the top, and then have that settling tank blow down with a motorized automated valve,
Mhm.
or we have to do really, really high grade what's called blowdown valves, which
Right.
is like a filter mechanism that then the water can automatically come in the opposite direction to blow the filter clean and then flush that down. So we have to do that kind of pre-filtration a lot in those areas for sure.
Okay, so what are some of the elements that you guys are seeing? Because a lot of people don't understand that, to have a healthy cell, you need all of these different elements in a cell. Like our hair, it has gold in it. It's parts per billion. But to have a healthy, cell of hair, you need some gold in your diet. So some of these things that are so rare, we don't see them often. Could you describe or tell us a little bit about those that are coming out?
When you say coming out, you mean coming out in that areas?
Yeah, like the Mother Nature has this way of rebalancing things, and volcanoes, etc., are one of the ways that she does this with, both in the air and on the land. I'm just, curious on, some of the substances that you're seeing in those areas where Mother Nature is basically cleansing and rebuilding things.
Yeah. So, I'm having to do this from memory just because I think I will be able to remember, but you have to realize that this isn't like the most common thing we do.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're going to get sulfates and sulfur, like we're going to get more hydrogen sulfide or sulfur dioxide. We will get some more heavy metals. We're going to get some more mercury or arsenic. Silica, obviously. An interesting thing that I remember that surprised me, though, is fluoride. Fluoride was high. And volcanic gases do have fluorine as part of them. And fluorine breaks down to fluoride. So fluorine is very different from fluoride, though. Don't get me wrong. Fluorine will kill you really fast. Fluoride is very close to fluorine, but will not kill you really fast. But yeah, it is metals. Fluoride was the most surprising one to me. Seeing higher levels of fluoride in those areas. So,
okay. Well, yeah, it just popped into my head out of curiosity to see some of the different components Mother Nature is putting back into our system. But we've got a good question for you here.
Sure.
So what do you think of the hydrogen water bottle? If someone can elaborate, please.
Yeah. So hydrogen water bottles are. I don't want to ruin any company's reputations, but I don't see how hydrogen can actually be added or increased significantly by one of those little bottles. Or that it would last if they bottle it at the factory, that it would last. So, I mean, if you dissolve molecular hydrogen, how are you dissolving that with a little mechanism? You'd need electrodes. They have to be coated in, I can't remember, platinum and something else. And then it would have to split the molecules, and then it would have to dissolve and not just release immediately. I don't know how that's actually in the reality check of that. I don't know how that's actually real. I bet in their perfect setting, in their perfect environment, they do a reading and they get a result that proves that they have extra hydrogen molecules or heavy hydrogenated water, like you would find in seawater, but without the salt. But hydrogen, it's going to escape really fast, fast. And so there are very expensive machines that will add hydrogen to the water accurately and well, and they will then allow you to pour a cup that will be hydrogenated water, and if you drink it right away, it will be hydrogenated water. That's real.
Yeah.
But doing something where you have water and you have a bottle and it creates hydrogen, or you even buy hydrogenated water, I don't believe any of that personally. So,
well, and there's a lot of gimmicks out there, and there always is going to be a lot of gimmicks out there. Yep. It could just be one. And Bob says, well, wouldn't it be peroxide?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't think it will. I think you'd have. Yes, good point.
What are you doing to your body, boy? Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
Silly Lily has a question. Do you come across glyphosate issues in your water treatment?
Yeah. We've had that before in people's water. We have absolutely run across that in well water results
Mhm.
and had to get it out for them. Yep.
So how do you get it out? What kind of a system are you using to pull the glyphosates out?
So carbon can remove those, and
Okay.
but so carbon does a good job of removing those. Um, the anion resin will actually do a more reliable job, but it has its own drawbacks. So
Mhm.
we do a lot of mixed bed solutions for that uh, to make sure that it's getting out, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah,
Uh,
well,
yeah,
it
go ahead.
it does make a lot of sense because, like, you look at it, say a fish tank, you have your sand layer, your gravel layer, etc. Each one's actually pulling out different components. So a layered system makes a lot more sense because it's going to be grabbing, different things. And then, you guys are using, say, electrolysis where, it's binding from the electromagnetic, capacity of whatever your system it has in it. But basically a lot of what I'm hearing is carbon filters, is going to help you, a lot, in solving a lot of problems for just a potential gardener. But when you're consuming that water yourself and you really want to be sure, reaching out to somebody
Yeah,
that has the expertise like you do is probably a really good way to go.
it is. The reason why that I personally find this super interesting, so I'll just say it. The reason why carbon is so good is because a single gram of carbon, like this much carbon,
Yeah, yeah.
right? A single gram, if you were to spread out the surface area of that carbon, you would cover 3 tennis courts.
Yeah.
So, and that's because it has so much microporous holes in it that it go down to the submicron level. It is
Mhm.
just super good at capturing stuff in it. But it is, unless it does its work chemically, that cannot be 100% relied upon. You have, because it's adsorption. It is,
Yeah.
whatever's traveling through it has to get caught against its sidewall or
Mhm.
against the surface of it, and it can just pass through. Um,
We do
unlike,
talk quite a bit about biochar, which is, we create
yeah,
our own charcoal, and we talk a lot about that, that 1 square inch being, the size of a football field.
yeah,
And we use call it biochar because we add the biology into it. Have you guys ever looked at that side of it, packing it up with biology, and then trying that as a carbon filter, not just the raw carbon, just
do
out
you
of
mean
curiosity?
like bone, basically? Do you mean like,
No, you can take wood and through pyrolysis,
yeah,
take all the
wood?
gases, moisture out of it. It creates, a pure charcoal.
Yep,
And then we generally will add biology to it. So it's the biology living inside. So it would be the biology, uh, you know,
interesting.
grabbing the stuff. We put it into soil, and it's fantastic in soil
I
as
bet.
long as the biology is there. But yeah, I would be curious. Maybe I can hook you up with
I,
somebody that can get you some biochar to test that.
yes, I would love to test that. There is every kind of charcoal test done
Hmm.
that you can imagine in the water treatment industry. They have tested everything, but they have never, as far as I know, done what you just described, where they're adding biology back. I don't even know what that means. And I would love to understand what that means, because that sounds really interesting, especially for plants.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I know, and I don't know, is he in? I think he's in Oregon, so I think he's a little south of you. Dr. Charlie Schultz.
Mm.
He's an aquaponics specialist.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I haven't talked to him in a while. He had a biochar bed that he was growing in, and I haven't heard about his results yet, but that might be something that's very basic in understanding of how biology cleans our water, a lot better than filtration systems can.
Yeah.
Him using it. So yeah, after the show, I'll connect you with a couple of people
Great.
and see, because these are things that in my brain run through my brain every once in a while. I go, geez, I wonder if,
Yeah.
I know you have to go pick up your kids. So
I do. Yeah.
yeah, we're going to have you back on to talk more about this.
Yeah, we didn't talk about fluoride. We didn't talk about Flint. I'd love to come back on, go over all the other stuff. Yeah.
And Super Nessus, I could send biochar charged with sap, another on, and I want tested. So maybe you guys can work a little bit together. Super Nessa, reach out to him at purewaternorthwest.com, and you guys can work on arranging things. So it was a real pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
And we'll definitely have you back on. So do you guys do any talks or anything like that? Where can people other than your website find you?
I will talk to anyone, but honestly, I would love to do seminars. I just honestly, might be a little embarrassing, but I don't know how to get them to come. I could do seminars all day long about water. I could talk to 1,000 people in a room. I believe I could plan a seminar. I could keep them all entertained the whole time and really educate them, but I don't really know how to get them there. So, but yeah, I mean, if people want to show up, I'll tell them, I'll give them all the free information they want about water. For sure.
Well, maybe you need to start reaching out and seeing who's doing regenerative conferences, stuff like that, because then you could go there and be a speaker and people would learn more about this.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, guys, I'm going to end the broadcast because he's got to get going here with his kids, and I'll shoot you emails afterwards with the contacts. So
great.
Have a great day, my friend, and you go pick up your kids.